I was 17 when I plunged the knife into my mother's chest. I felt her collapse onto the kitchen counter, her eyes filled with surprise and terror, and for the first time in years, I felt something like peace. I know I'm sick. I know you'll think I'm a monster. But how does a boy survive when the person who should protect him is the same person who delivers him to hell every night? My name is Lucas. Recidivist, I'm 17 years old, and I'm telling this story from a juvenile detention center. I've never talked about this with anyone, but I can't take it anymore. They transferred me here 3 months ago after what happened with my mother. Psychologists say that talking about trauma can help in the healing process, but I'm not looking for healing. I'm looking for understanding. You've probably heard about me in the news. Teenager kills his own mother by stabbing her in the kitchen of their home. The newspapers painted me as a monster, a heartless psychopath. I don't blame them. From their perspective, that's exactly what I am. A son who took his own mother's life for no apparent reason, but there's always more to the story than the headlines show. There's always a dark past that no one sees, invisible scars that we carry inside. And in my case, there's a betrayal so deep that it still cuts my soul every night. I'm not here to justify myself or ask for forgiveness. I'm here to tell my story, the whole truth that never made it into the newspapers. The truth about the 5 years of hell I lived under the same roof that should have protected me. The truth about how I discovered that my own mother knew everything and chose to look the other way. I know it's hard to believe. It took me years to accept the reality myself. How could a mother do this to her own child? It's this question that keeps me awake every night, even now when I'm finally away from him. Before I continue, I need you to understand that what I did was terrible. Taking a life is something I will carry with me forever. But after you hear the whole story, I want you to ask yourself what you would have done in my place. If you're really paying attention to my story, if you're willing to listen to what I have to say without judging me, I ask that you like this video right now. It's important for me to know that someone is listening. I also ask that you subscribe to the Traumatic Testimonials channel, turn on notifications, and comment where you're watching from. It's strange to ask this in the middle of my story, I know, but I need to feel that there is someone out there who wants to understand. What I'm about to tell you will completely change the way you see my story. It's a truth that I've been keeping as an open wound for so long that I no longer even know where the pain ends and I begin. I was born into an ordinary middle-class family in Naples, Italy. My parents emigrated to Mexico when I was just 3 years old in search of better opportunities. My father, Jose, worked in construction. He was a man of few words but had a strong presence. My mother, Maria, was a secretary in a small office in the city center. We were a simple but happy family. I have memories of my childhood that seem like another life. My father teaching me to ride a bike in the park near our house. My mother making homemade pasta on Sundays with that tomato sauce that filled the whole house with its aroma. I remember laughter, hugs before bedtime, feeling safe. Everything changed when I was 8 years old. My father had an accident at work, falling from scaffolding. They said it was instant death, that he didn't suffer, as if that could somehow comfort us, as if that could fill the void he left behind. My mother was devastated. Suddenly, she was a 35-year-old widow with a young son to raise alone in a country that still didn't feel completely like our own. In the first few months after my father's death, she cried every night after I went to bed. I could hear her sobs through the thin walls of our small apartment and felt helpless. The insurance money didn't last long. Soon my mother was working 2 jobs to keep the bills paid. I stayed with our neighbor, Doña Carmen, after school. We were struggling, but we were together. We were a team, as my mother used to say. A year after my father's death, everything changed again. My mother met Enrique at work. He was tall, strong, with those big hands that initially seemed protective to me. He worked as a manager in a factory and earned good money. When he was around, my mother smiled again. I hadn't seen that smile since my father was alive. Enrique began to visit our house frequently. He brought me gifts, games, new tennis shoes, things my mother couldn't afford. At first, I was suspicious. I didn't want anyone replacing my father, but he was patient. He never forced himself on me. "Your father will always be your father, kid," he said to me once when we were alone. "I just want to make your mother happy and help you have a better life." A few months later, they got married in a simple ceremony at the civil registry office. We moved into Enrique's house in a better neighborhood. I got a room of my own, bigger than the previous one. My mother was able to quit one of her jobs. Our life improved materially almost overnight. The first 2 years were normal. Enrique was kind to me, took me to play soccer on Sundays, helped me with my math homework. My mother seemed happy again. We had family dinners. We went out for walks on the weekends. On the outside, we were the perfect family. But when I turned 12, everything changed. The first time was on a normal night. My mother had gone out to visit a friend who was ill. I was home alone with Enrique. We were watching a soccer game on TV. He was drinking more than usual. I had never seen him drunk before. "You're becoming a little man, Lucas," he said, putting his arm around my shoulder. There was something different in his tone, something that made me feel sick inside. I'm not going to go into detail about what happened that night. Some things are too difficult, even to put into words. I'll just say that after that night, my childhood was definitely over. "If you tell your mother anything," he whispered before leaving my room, "I'll deny everything. She'll choose to believe me, not you, and then we'll both leave and you'll be alone." "Is that what you want?" No, that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted my mother. I wanted my life back. I wanted it all to be just a nightmare. But it wasn't. Over the next few months, I developed a sixth sense. I knew exactly when my mother would leave the house. I could tell by the look in Enrique's eyes when he was in a mood. I learned to stay out of the house as much as possible. I made up activities at school, studying at the library, anything to avoid being alone with him. But it didn't always work. Sometimes Enrique came home early from work. Sometimes my mother had last-minute commitments and then the nightmare would start all over again. I started to change. My grades, which had been excellent, plummeted. I stopped talking to the few friends I had. I became quiet, withdrawn. The teachers noticed the change. They called my mother to talk about my behavior. "It's just a phase," she said. "Adolescence, you know how difficult it is." At home, when it was just the two of us, she tried to talk to me. "Is something wrong, Lucas? Can you tell me about it?" I wanted to tell her. God, how I wanted to. But then I remembered Enrique's threats, the fear of being completely alone, and the words died in my throat. "It's nothing, Mom, I'm just tired." There were days when she looked at me as if she knew something was wrong, as if she could feel her son disappearing before her eyes. But then Enrique would arrive. She would smile at him and the moment would pass. I started having trouble sleeping. Constant nightmares would wake me up sweating and shaking in the middle of the night. Sometimes I would scream in my sleep. My mother would come into my room, worried. "You were screaming again." Another nightmare? "Yes. Sorry for waking you up. Do you want to talk about it?" "No, it's over now. Go back to sleep." She would hesitate at the door as if she wanted to say something else, but she never did. She would just close the door and go back to her and Enrique's room. It was around that time that I began to notice certain strange things. How my mother avoided leaving me alone with Enrique, but always ended up having commitments she couldn't postpone. How she avoided looking me in the eye after the most difficult nights. How she started buying me expensive gifts for no special occasion. At school, I met Alejandro, a Chilean boy who had come to Mexico with his family. He was different from the others.
He didn't judge me for being quiet or strange. He simply accepted my silence and sat with me during recess.
Little by little, we became friends. "There's something strange going on at your house, isn't there?" he asked me one day as we walked home. "Why do you say that?" "Because of the way you talk about your stepfather, or rather the way you don't talk about him." I almost told Alejandro everything that day. I almost let go of the weight I was carrying, but I couldn't. The words just wouldn't come out. "My stepfather is fine," I replied. "We're just not very close." Alejandro nodded, but his eyes told me he didn't believe me. "If you need to talk, I'm here." That was all he said. Time passed, and the situation at home only got worse. I was 14 when things started to spiral completely out of control. Enrique drank more and more. His mood swings became more frequent and unpredictable. It was no longer just when my mother was out. Sometimes it was in the middle of the afternoon when she was downstairs. Sometimes it was in the early hours of the morning when she was asleep. I developed an elaborate defense system. I placed a chair under my door handle. I started sleeping with a razor blade under my pillow. I asked Alejandro to teach me some self-defense moves. He had practiced karate since he was a child, but none of that worked when Enrique was determined. "If you resist, it will only be worse," he told me. "If you stay still and cooperate, I'll finish faster and we'll all be happy." Happy, as if it were possible to feel anything like happiness in that house. My body began to show signs of abuse, bruises that I tried to hide with long-sleeved clothes, even in the heat, and deep dark circles under my eyes from the chronic insomnia I developed. I lost weight dramatically. Food just wouldn't go down my throat. One day, in physical education class, the teacher noticed the bruises on my arms when I had to change my shirt. "Lucas, where did those bruises come from?" "I fell off my bike," I replied automatically. The rehearsed excuse. "These all look like finger marks." "It's nothing, teacher. I'm fine." He looked at me for a long moment. "You know you can talk to me if something is going on at home, right?" I nodded but said nothing. What good would it do? Who would believe me against Enrique, the perfect stepfather, the attentive husband, the breadwinner? And even if they did believe me, what would happen to me and my mother? That night, when I got home, my mother was waiting for me in the kitchen. She was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she held a cup of tea. "The school called me today," she said. "The physical education teacher is worried about you. He said he saw marks on your body." I felt my stomach sink. "It's nothing, Mom. I fell off my bike." "Lucas," her voice faltered. "Can you tell me if something is going on?" "Anything." For a brief moment, I thought about telling her everything, about breaking down that wall of silence and finally releasing the words that were suffocating inside me. But then I heard Enrique coming home, the sound of the door opening, his keys jingling, and the moment passed. "It's nothing," I repeated. "I'm fine." Something in her eyes dimmed. She nodded slowly and looked back at her cup. We never brought it up again. The following months were a blur of pain and dissociation. I began to disconnect from my own body during the episodes with Enrique. It was as if I were floating above the scene, watching everything happen to someone else. Psychologists call this a defense mechanism. I called it survival. Things got worse at school, too. Some kids found out about the bruises and started spreading rumors. Resendez cuts herself. I heard she tries to kill herself. "She's a Seco!" The only person who stayed by my side was Alejandro. He never asked about the marks, never pressured me to talk. He was just there. One day, when we were alone in the library, he handed me a small notebook. "It's a journal," he explained. "Writing helps. When we can't talk about something, sometimes we can write it down." I took the notebook, thanked him, but didn't think I would use it. What would I write? How could I put into words the hell I was living? But one night, after a particularly brutal episode with Enrique, I picked up the notebook. The words began to flow like a dammed river finally finding a breach. I wrote everything down. Every sordid detail, every threat, every night of terror. It was as if I were vomiting poison, purging what was consuming me inside. Writing became my refuge. When I was done, I hid the diary in a loose space in the floor of my room. It was my secret, my only escape. It was around that time that I began to notice other strange things at home. Conversations abruptly interrupted when I entered the living room, phone calls Enrique received late at night that made him rush out. The way my mother sometimes looked at him, not with love, but with fear. One night I woke up to the sound of arguing coming from their room. "You promised you'd be careful." My mother's voice was tense and low. The teacher saw the marks. "Relax, Maria, I took care of it. The boy knows how to keep his mouth shut. It's not just that. He's different. He doesn't eat. He doesn't talk. The teachers are noticing. What do you want me to do? Stop? Do you know what will happen if I stop? Just be more discreet. Don't leave marks where they can see." I was paralyzed in the darkness of my room, my heart beating so hard I thought it would explode. I couldn't have heard right. My mother couldn't be. It was impossible, but the words were there, echoing in my head. Be more discreet. Don't stop hurting my son, just be more discreet. In the days that followed, I watched my mother with new eyes. The way she avoided being in the same room as Enrique and me, how she casually left when he came home in a bad mood, how she turned up the TV volume when I screamed during the night. Small patterns that I had ignored or justified in some way began to make sense. Terrible, horrible meaning. She knew. My own mother knew what Enrique was doing to me and was choosing to ignore it. Worse, she was actively creating situations for it to happen. It was as if the last pillar supporting my world had collapsed. My mother, the person who should protect me above all else, was betraying me in the worst possible way. I stopped writing in my journal. Some betrayals are too big, even for words. At school, Alejandro noticed the change. "You seem different," he commented during recess. "More empty." "I'm fine," I replied automatically. "No, you're not." No one is fine with that look. "It's like you've given up." I didn't answer. What could I say? That I had discovered that my mother was consciously allowing her husband to abuse me, that the only person who should have protected me had made a pact with the bike, Lucas. Alejandro put his hand on my shoulder. "Whatever is going on, you don't have to face it alone." I almost laughed. Alone. I had always been alone, even when I thought I had my mother by my side. I was alone. It was around that time that suicidal thoughts began to grow stronger. It wasn't just a vague idea, but concrete plans. Pills, cutting my wrists, jumping off a bridge, anything to escape that hell. I started cutting myself. Small cuts on my arms, on my thighs, in places no one would see. The physical pain was a temporary relief from the emotional pain that consumed me. One night I went too far. I cut deeper than I intended. Blood spurted out, staining my bedsheets. I panicked. I didn't want to die. Not like this. Not yet. I pressed a t-shirt against the cut, trying to stop the bleeding. My mother entered the room without knocking. She stopped at the door, staring at the scene. Me, pale, pressing the bloody t-shirt against my arm, the razor blade lying on the floor. Lucas, her voice a horrified whisper. "Get out of here," I managed to say through gritted teeth. She didn't leave. Instead, she entered the room and closed the door behind her. She took the t-shirt from my hands and examined the cut. "We need to take you to the hospital. This needs stitches." "No, Lucas, you could die." "Yes, and what would be better than living in this hell?" She froze, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in weeks. "What are you talking about?" "You know very well what I'm talking about. About Enrique, about what he does to me, about how you know and do nothing." Her face drained of color. "Lucas, I don't know what you're talking about." "Stop!" I shouted. I didn't care if Enrique could hear. At that moment, I didn't care about anything. I heard them talking. "Be more discreet." "That's what you said. Stop hurting my son or be more discreet." Tears began to run down his face. They weren't tears of surprise or horror. They were tears of guilt. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "It's complicated." "Complicated? What's complicated about protecting your own son? What's complicated about not allowing a monster to abuse him? Please lower your voice. If Enrique hears, is that what you're worried about? That Enrique hears. Not that your husband is abusing your son, but that he finds out that we know you know." She sat on the edge of my bed, her face buried in her hands. "You don't understand," she repeated. "Without Enrique, we have nothing. We go back to that tiny apartment, to the bills we can't pay, to the food that isn't enough." I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. My mother was putting financial comfort above my well-being, above my sanity, above my life. "So that's it?" I asked. My voice strangely calm. "You'd rather see me destroyed than go back to being poor?" She lifted her face, her eyes red and swollen. "It's not that simple, Lucas Enrique. He threatened to hurt us if I told anyone. He said he would kill us and then kill himself." "And you believed him?" "You haven't seen what he's like when he's really angry. It wasn't an easy choice, Lucas. I thought you were strong, that you could hold out until when? Until I kill myself. Until he got tired of me, until I turned 18 and could leave home. He promised he'd stop when you came of age." I laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. "And you believed him?" She didn't answer. There was nothing to say. That night, after she bandaged my arm, we refused to go to the hospital. There would be too many questions. Something inside me changed. It was no longer fear or despair. It was something colder, more calculated, anger. If my own mother wouldn't protect me, I would have to protect myself. If the system failed me, I would create my own system. If no one would bring justice, I would. The breaking point came when I had just turned 16. I was home alone. My mother had gone out shopping and Enrique was at work. I decided to take advantage of the rare privacy to look for anything that might help me better understand the situation. I started with the document drawer in the study. Birth certificates, paid bills, insurance papers. Nothing useful. Then I went to their bedroom, checked the closets, the drawers, looked under the bed. I was about to give up when I noticed a shoebox on top of the closet. I had to use a chair to reach it. Inside were old photos, documents, and a small leather-bound notebook. I opened the notebook expecting to find recipes or shopping lists, but what I saw changed my life forever. It was my mother's diary. The first entry I read, dated 3 years earlier, said, "Lucas has been acting strange lately. Enrique says it's normal for boys his age to be like this, but I know something is going on. Last night I heard him crying in his room. When I asked Enrique if he knew anything, he got nervous and changed the subject. I think I know what's going on, but I can't face it. I can't lose Enrique. Without him, we have nothing." My hands began to shake as I turned the pages. Enrique confessed everything last night. He says he can't control himself, that Lucas provokes him without realizing it. He apologized and cried like a child. He swore he would stop, but he also reminded me of everything he does for us. The house, the food, the stability. Jose never gave us so much. I don't know what to do. If I report him, we lose everything. If I do nothing, I lose my son. But Lucas is strong. He can get through this. Other kids have been through worse and moved on. The notebook fell from my hands. I felt as if the world had stopped. My mother knew. Not only did she know, but she had consciously chosen to protect Enrique instead of protecting me. I kept reading page after page of justifications, internal negotiations, poorly digested guilt. Months have passed since Enrique confessed. Lucas is getting worse and worse. His grades are a disaster. He fights at school. He barely talks to me. Yesterday he tried to tell me what was going on, but I couldn't listen. If I admit that I know the truth, I'll have to do something about it. And I can't. I can't go back to being poor. I can't go back to working 2 shifts to make ends meet. Enrique promised me he'll be more careful, that he won't leave any marks. He says that when Lucas turns 18, he'll stop. I just have to hold on for 2 more years. I threw up right there on the floor of her room. My own mother had traded my safety for financial stability. She had put a price on my suffering. 2 years of hell in exchange for never being poor again. But the entry that destroyed me the most was the last one. Lucas turns 16 today, only 2 more years. Enrique has kept his word to be more discreet, although I know things have gotten worse. Last night I heard Lucas screaming in his sleep. When I went to check on him, there was blood on the sheets. Enrique says it's because Lucas resists too much, that if he were more cooperative, he wouldn't hurt himself so much. Maybe he's right. Maybe I should talk to Lucas, explain that it's better not to resist for everyone's sake. I closed the diary and sat there on the floor, surrounded by my own vomit, processing the greatest betrayal of my life. My mother wasn't an ignorant victim. She was an active accomplice who had sold me to her husband for money. When I heard her car in the driveway, I quickly put everything away and ran to my room. I spent the night awake planning my next move. I couldn't wait for someone to save me anymore. I had to save myself. The next few days were the strangest of my life. I continued to act normal, going to school, eating dinner with my family, pretending I knew nothing. But inside, something had changed forever. I was no longer the scared boy who waited for his mother to save him. I was someone completely different. I began to plan. First, I needed direct confirmation. One night, when my mother was watching TV in the living room, I sat down next to her and asked, "Mom, do you love me?" She looked at me in surprise. "Of course I do, honey. You're the most important thing in my life. Would you do anything to protect me?" Of course, a mother always protects her children, even if it meant losing Enrique. I saw her tense up. Her eyes drifted to the TV. "Why are you asking this?" "Just curious." That night, Enrique didn't come to my room, but I heard raised voices coming from their room. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was argumentative. The next morning, my mother's eyes were swollen as if she had been crying. During breakfast, she looked at me strangely. Lucas said, "Is there something you want to tell me?" It was my chance, my last chance to get him to do the right thing. "Yes, Mom, there's something very important I need to tell you about Enrique." I saw him brace himself, as if he knew exactly what I was going to say. "I'm listening. He's been hurting me for 5 years, almost every night. It's hell. I need your help." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother stared at her coffee for what seemed like an eternity. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold as ice. "Lucas, we've already talked about this. You can't keep making up these stories. Enrique is a good man. I'm not making anything up, and you know it." Her eyes met mine for the first time in months. I saw fear in them, but also determination. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I read your diary." My mother froze. The coffee cup fell from her hands and shattered on the floor. "What? I read everything. I know you know what Enrique does to me. I know you chose to protect him instead of protecting me. I know you sold me for money." She stood up abruptly, her face red with rage. "You had no right to read my private things. What worries you?" "That I read your diary, not that your husband abuses me every night." "Enough. I'm not going to listen to these lies anymore." "Lies, Mom. It's all written in your handwriting. You yourself confessed that you knew everything." She approached me with her fists clenched. For a moment, I thought she was going to hit me. "Listen carefully, Lucas. I don't know what you think you read, but you're confused. Enrique has never touched you. And if you keep making up these stories, I'll have to take you to a psychiatrist." It was at that moment that I understood there was no turning back. My mother had chosen her side, and it wasn't mine. She never had been. "It's okay, Mom," I said with a calmness that surprised me. "You're right. I must be confused." I saw her relax, thinking she had won. "Fine. and I hope you don't go through my things again. I won't. The next night, I heard my bedroom door open. It was Enrique, like so many other nights, but this time I was prepared. My mother knows what you do to me, I said before he could say anything. He stopped at the door. What did you say? That my mother knows. I read her diary. She knows everything and she doesn't care. I expected him to get angry, to hit me, to deny everything, but what he did was worse. He laughed. Of course she knows, he said, sitting on my bed as if we were old friends. Do you think I'm stupid? Your mother and I have talked about this many times. I felt as if a knife had been stabbed into my chest. What? She knows I need this. She knows that if it's not you, I'll find another boy, and she'd rather it be you who's family than a stranger. Are you lying? Seriously. Ask her why she always finds excuses to leave when we're alone. Ask her why she never enters your room without knocking first. Ask her why she buys you expensive gifts after our special nights. Every word was like a hammer in my head. It all made sense. All my mother's strange behavior, all her evasiveness, all the gifts she gave me after the worst nights. Your mother is a practical woman, Enrique continued. She knows that without me they would go back to living in poverty, and she is willing to make any sacrifice to avoid that, even sacrificing you. That night, after Enrique finished with me, I stayed awake until dawn. There was nothing left of the boy I had been. In his place was something cold and calculating, something that knew exactly what it needed to do. The next day was Saturday. Enrique had left early to work overtime. My mother was in the kitchen preparing lunch, humming a song as if it were the most normal day in the world. I approached her from behind. Mom, we need to talk. She turned around with a forced smile. About what, honey? About the truth. Her smile disappeared. Lucas, I already told you that Enrique told me that you know everything.
He told me that you've talked about this many times.
He told me that you'd rather it be me than another boy. I saw her collapse, as if all her lies had fallen away at once. She leaned on the counter, her face pale as a ghost. Lucas, it's true. Silence. It's true. Yes, he finally cried out, tears running down his cheeks. Yes, it's true, but you have no idea how hard it's been for me. I felt as if my heart had been ripped out of my chest. Hearing the confirmation from his own lips was worse than reading the diary. Hard for you, I repeated incredulously. Hard for you, don't you understand? After your father died, we had nothing. I worked 16 hours a day and we could barely pay the rent. Enrique saved us. Enrique is destroying me, I know.
Do you think I don't know?
Do you think it's easy for me to know what's going on and not be able to do anything? Yes, you can do something, you can report him, you can protect me. And then we'll go back to living in misery, we'll go back to eating noodle soup every day, we'll go back to living in that miserable apartment where water leaked in when it rained. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother was justifying my destruction for money. Just 1 more year, she continued, reaching out to me with her hands outstretched. When you turn 18, Enrique will stop. He promised me. You just need to hold on for 1 more year. 1 year? I laughed. An empty sound. A whole year of being destroyed every night while you pretend nothing is happening. Do you think it's easy for me? Do you think it's easy to hear you cry at night and not be able to do anything? Then why don't you do something? Because I can't. Because if I report Enrique, we'll lose everything. And not just that. He promised me that if I betray him, he'll really hurt you. At least now I know you're safe. Safe. You call this being safe? She remained silent, crying quietly. Finally, her voice breaking, she said to me, Lucas, I know you can't understand it now, but someday you will. Someday you'll understand that sometimes parents have to make impossible decisions. It was at that moment that something inside me broke forever. My mother wasn't a victim. She was an accomplice. She was just as monstrous as Enrique, but in a different way. He destroyed my body, but she had destroyed my soul. You're right, Mom, I said with a calmness that frightened me. I can't understand. And then I picked up the kitchen knife that was on the counter. What happened next was like being in a dream, or rather a nightmare from which I could finally wake up. My mother saw the knife in my hand and her eyes filled with terror. Lucas, what are you doing? What I should have done years ago. Please put that down. We can talk. We already talked. For 5 years we talked in silence. You knew what was happening to me and you chose to do nothing. You chose to sacrifice me for money. It's not just about money, it's about our survival. Our survival. Mom, I haven't been surviving. I've been slowly dying every night for 5 years. She approached me with her hands outstretched, as if I were a wild animal that needed to be calmed down. Lucas, I know you're hurt, but this isn't the solution. What is the solution then? Wait another year. Let Enrique continue to destroy me while you pretend nothing is happening. We'll find another way. We had 5 years to find another way. Please, I'm your mother. You're not, I said, and my voice sounded strangely calm. A mother protects her children. A mother doesn't sell them for financial stability. You're not my mother, you're my jailer. I saw how those words hit her like a slap in the face. She staggered back, her face contorted with pain. Lucas, please, do you know what hurts me most about all this? It's not the abuse, it's not the physical pain. It's knowing that the person who supposedly loved me more than anything in the world betrayed me in the worst possible way. I love you. No, if you loved me, you would have chosen poverty over allowing them to destroy me. If you loved me, you would have reported Enrique on the first day. If you loved me, you would have put my well-being above your comfort. She was crying now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure rage, of years of accumulated pain, of betrayal and abandonment. Mom, do you know how many times I thought about killing myself? Do you know how many times I cut my wrists hoping I would have the courage to cut them deeper? Do you know how many nights I lay awake planning ways to kill myself to escape this hell? I didn't know. Of course you knew. You saw the scars on my arms. You saw how I stopped eating. You saw how I became a ghost. But you chose to ignore it because it was easier than facing the truth. She collapsed against the wall, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm sorry, Lucas. I'm so sorry. Are you sorry? Really, are you sorry? I'm sorry I wasn't stronger. I'm sorry I couldn't find another way. Do you know what you really regret? Do you regret being found out? Do you regret not being able to keep pretending you're a good mother? But you don't regret betraying me. That's not true. Then prove it. Call the police right now. Report Enrique. She remained silent. Even at that moment, even with a knife pointed at her, she couldn't choose me over him. You can't, can you? Because even now, even knowing you're going to lose me forever, you still choose Enrique. Lucas, it's more complicated than that. It's not complicated, it's simple. Either you choose your son or you choose your husband, and you've already made your choice. That's when I moved towards her. It wasn't premeditated, it wasn't calculated, it was pure rage. 5 years of pain exploding at once. The knife sank into her chest before she could react. Her eyes opened wide in surprise, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. She collapsed onto the counter, her hand on the wound, looking at me with an expression I will never forget. Lucas, she whispered, blood pouring from her mouth. Now you don't have to choose, I said, and my voice sounded like a stranger's. Now you don't have to pretend to love me while you give yourself to him every night. She fell to the floor, and I stood there watching the life drain from her eyes. I felt no remorse, I felt no sadness, I felt relief. For the first time in 5 years, I felt free. The neighbors called the police when they heard the screams. When they arrived, they found me sitting on the floor next to my mother's body, still holding the knife. I didn't try to run away, I didn't try to lie. I told them exactly what had happened. Now I'm here in this juvenile detention center telling my story for the first time. The psychologists tell me that what I did was wrong, that there were other ways to solve the problem, but I disagree. My mother betrayed me in the worst possible way. She sold me to a predator for money and comfort. For 5 years, she pretended to love me while allowing me to be destroyed every night. That's not love, that's complicity. I don't regret what I did for a second, because for the first time in years, I can sleep at night without fear. For the first time in years, I don't have to wonder if the person who supposedly loves me will betray me again. This happened 8 months ago. I was tried as a minor and sentenced to serve time until I turned 21 in this detention center. Enrique was also arrested after the investigation revealed evidence of abuse. He ended up confessing everything in the hope of getting a lighter sentence. It didn't work. He was given 15 years without the possibility of parole. The first few months here were difficult. Constant nightmares, panic attacks, dissociative episodes. Psychologists call it post-traumatic stress disorder. I call it the consequences of surviving hell. I have therapy sessions 3 times a week. At first, I refused to talk. What was there to say that hadn't already been said in court, in statements, in psychological evaluations? But little by little, I began to realize that talking helps. It doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't undo what I did, but it makes the burden a little lighter. Dr. Ramirez, my primary psychologist, says I've made significant progress. You're starting to process the trauma, she told me in our last session. That's critical to your recovery. Recovery. How do you recover from something like this? How do you move on after discovering that the person who should love you unconditionally sold you to be abused? How do you live with the memory of taking your own mother's life? I don't have answers to these questions. I just know that I'm trying. Day after day, I'm trying to find some meaning in all this, some way to move forward. Alejandro still visits me. He's the only one from my past who has kept in touch. He comes once a month, brings books, tells me about school, about friends, about life out there. He never asks about what happened, never judges me for what I did. He's just there, a constant presence in a world that collapsed. You know it wasn't your fault, right? He asked me on a recent visit. None of what happened to you was your fault. I want to believe him. Part of me knows he's right. I was a child, a victim. I had no control over what was happening. But another part, the part that still hears Enrique's voice whispering in the dark, wonders if I could have done something different. If I could have asked for help sooner, talked to someone, found a way out that didn't end with blood on my hands. The truth is, I'll never know. I can't go back and make different choices. I can only move forward from here, carry the physical and emotional scars, and try to build something with what's left of me. Psychologists say that someday I will be able to forgive my mother, that forgiveness is not for her but for me, to free myself from the weight of anger and resentment. I'm not there yet. I don't know if I ever will be. How do you forgive such a fundamental betrayal? How do you forgive someone who chose their comfort over your safety, your sanity, your life? Sometimes, on the darkest nights, when the nightmares are worst and the memories most vivid, I find myself thinking about her. Not the mother who betrayed me, but the mother I knew as a child. The one who made pasta on Sundays, who kissed me on the forehead before bed, who hummed while she tidied the house. Was that love real, or was it always a facade, an elaborate lie to hide her true nature? And if it was real, when did it change? When did she stop being my protector and become my jailer? Maybe I'll never have answers to these questions. Maybe needing answers is part of the problem. Some wounds don't heal with explanations or justifications. Some betrayals are too big to be understood. Maybe all I can do is accept that it happened and try to move on. The future is uncertain. When I get out of here at 21, I won't have a family, I won't have a home, I won't have a history, except for the one everyone knows from the newspapers. The boy who killed his mother. I will have to build a life from scratch, carrying the weight of what happened and what I did. I don't know if I am strong enough for that. I don't know if anyone would be, but the alternative is to give up, and I have spent too much time being a victim to choose that path. For now, I focus on the day-to-day, on the small victories, a night without nightmares, a productive therapy session, a book I managed to finish. Little by little, I'm trying to rebuild some sense of normalcy, of security. Dr. Ramirez says that one day I'll be able to trust again, to form connections, maybe even to love. I want to believe her. I want to believe that not everything in me is broken beyond repair, that there is a way forward, however difficult and painful it may be. If you've made it this far and you really understand what I went through, I ask you to like this video, subscribe to the Traumatic Testimonials channel, turn on notifications, and comment on what time it is where you are right now. I know it's strange to ask this in the middle of such a personal story, but it helps me know that I'm not alone, that there are people listening, that my story matters to someone. I don't know if I did the right thing that day in the kitchen. I don't know if there was another way out. I only know that at that moment, with that knife in my hand, I felt as if I was finally taking back control of my life, as if after years of being a victim, I could finally decide my own destiny. The price was high. I will carry the weight of that day for the rest of my life, but for the first time in a long time, I can sleep without fear. For the first time in years, I don't have to wonder when the next abuse, the next betrayal will come. It's a strange kind of freedom born of the deepest despair. It's not perfect, it's not without scars, but it's mine. And maybe that's all I can hope for now. Not a life without pain, but a life where pain does not completely define me, where I can be more than the sum of my wounds. For those of you who have faced your own hells, who carry your own secrets, I want you to know you are not alone. Your story matters, your pain is real, and there is a way forward, however impossible it may seem right now. This is my story. It's not pretty, it's not inspiring, it doesn't have a happy ending, but it's true. And sometimes the truth is all we have left when everything else has been taken from us.